stated by the scientist, Dr. Harrington. Now, if it was then in 1983 within the gravitational influence of the sun, it would have been sucked in continuously from that time on until now toward the sun. It has to be. It's basic physics. It's like an asteroid. Imagine an asteroid that gets within the gravitational influence of Earth. Even though it's way, way up there, many miles high, it's still barely within the weak gravitational influence of Earth. It's going to be gravitationally, gradually pulled down toward Earth, and as it gets closer, the gravitational force of attraction will increase, and therefore its acceleration will also increase until it comes hurtling toward Earth. And that's exactly what is happening with this brown dwarf star, except that it's not hurtling toward Earth, it's hurtling toward the sun. Which
John, one of the indicators of this is an email I got from Richard St. Laurent up in Canada. He's another outstanding Planet X researcher. He showed me in this email these graphs of all these near-Earth object asteroids that had just gone up through the roof in the late 90s, so that would just be another indicator.
So you mean there's been a tremendous increase in near-Earth objects that were sighted, huh?
Yeah,
a big increase.
Right.
Ever since from then until now.
I would say like late 90s, maybe 97 or 98. That number just went through the roofs. And Planet X has an entourage of accompanying celestial objects with it as it comes in.
Right. So I mean, as it gets closer, visualize Planet X as a huge beehive traveling through space. With a swarm of bees swarming all around it. Now that would be the gravitationally captured comets and celestial bodies of all sizes, actually. Everything from the size of small planets down to comets, and then smaller objects such as asteroids, and then even smaller objects such as meteors, then boulders, rocks, and even a cloud of iron oxide dust which it surrounds it. And that's another thing that makes it difficult to see, is that cloud of dust. Besides the fact that it emits only infrared light, which is not only visible with infrared telescopes. But the ancient historians tell us, and even the Bible is a very good ancient historical book. The Bible tells us in the book of Exodus that the waters of Egypt turned red during the time of all these cataclysms. Well, that would be explained by the tail of this comet, or one of this huge brown dwarf star on a cometary orbit, its tail sweeping the Earth with iron oxide dust. And it would pollute the water. And indeed, if you go to the book of Exodus, I could read it directly to you, but I could paraphrase it right now. The water was so bitter and foul from this redness that polluted the waters that the people were getting sick from drinking it. And they were digging feverishly, trying to find wells, freshwater wells, throughout Egypt during this time. And not only is the book of Exodus describe this event, but also the Colburn Bible, and specifically the Ipuwer Papyrus, I-P-U-W-E-R. This is a historian, Egyptian historian, who lived through these great cataclysms. He describes pretty much the same thing, that the waters were foul and polluted, and people would vomit just from drinking this water. So we see what's going to happen to Earth when this red iron oxide dust its tail sweeps Earth.
Well, that's another subtle way that they're leaking it out through TV shows. They did a remake of that TV series V. Remember that?
What was the name of it?
V. V as in Victor, where these alien humans are living here on Earth with us. Originally, the original one came out in the 80s, but they did a remake of it, and the title of the last episode of the first season was like Red Rain or Red Dust, and then...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, they subtly tell us this stuff all the time, and then John also came across...
Well, maybe we could find that. Maybe we could find that episode of V. It's titled Red Dust or Red Rain. We could find that on YouTube. Maybe YouTube has practically everything.
One episode was called Red Rain, and the other Red Dust. Yeah, it's interesting. But John also come across this verse in the Bible, Isaiah 63, where it says, "God will send from afar His glittering blood-red object to its distant goal, which is Earth." Can you tell the audience about that, John?
Yeah. I guess maybe as things get more disastrous, people tend to turn closer to God and seek out that invisible being. We wonder why our hearts are beating constantly. Who keeps us going? Who gives us the magic, miracle of life, and the wonderful things around us that sustain us. and beautify our world. And of course, we all know that there's a God, but we ignore that God when times are easy. Well, now the times have been getting more difficult and more harrowing. I've been getting closer in my thoughts to the existence of God. Again, it sounds sort of hypocritical. You know, we turn to God when we need Him out of fear, but we don't tend to turn to Him when things are going well. Well, I started to read the Bible, and I knew that I had to pray the Bible because there's some symbolism is just so deep that no human mind could fathom some of the symbolism in the Bible. So as I was making myself consciously aware of the invisible presence of God and reading the Bible, I got to this compulsion to go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 63, and start reading. And as I was reading, I was amazed at the symbolic likeness of this Isaiah 63 with the incoming planet X. And let me see if I could take it out of the King James or the complete Jewish Bible, maybe.
Well, while John's looking that up, I'd also like to tell the audience that it must have been 2 or 3 years ago they had this tremendous red-colored iron oxide dust storm over Australia, and as we know, that's in the southern hemisphere, right, John? That's
right. Now, the dust could not have been from the tail of Planet X because Planet X has not gotten that close to Earth yet.
But right, but Gilbert Erickson, he says he thinks that was a Planet X-related event.
Well, I mean, it could have been a comet. Now, a comet that was saturated with or engulfed in red iron oxide dust. Yeah, if that comet came by Earth, it could have happened. But I don't know. I mean, it's just so hard to say to draw a parallel between that red dust storm, and it certainly is something related to these celestial phenomena that are occurring now. I agree. It's just that it's hard to really say that it's related to being swept by a tail of a comet, because if we were swept by the tail of a comet, do you know what size of land masses that would engulf? That would cover much of the Earth, but this happened in a localized section of Australia, maybe 5 or 10 square miles, something like that. So I don't know what it was. It's some kind of strange phenomenon, but indeed it's related to these crazy celestial events that are occurring. Indeed, all this crazy weather is. But here's Isaiah chapter 63. Quote, who is this coming from Edom? Now, Edom symbolizes red, something red, okay? So there you go. There's a red. We know Planet X is a red body when it lights up. It's been stated that way by the ancient historians. Who is this coming from Edom? From Basra. And Basra symbolizes coming from the east. Coming from Basra with clothing stained crimson, red, so magnificently dressed, so stately in his great strength. Quote, it is I who speak victoriously, I, the Savior. And that smacks of the Lord Jesus, the Savior. Why? And then Isaiah answers God. He says, why is your apparel red? Your clothes are like someone treading a winepress. And God answers, the Savior answers, I have trodden the winepress alone. From the peoples, not one was with me. In other words, there's not one that was perfect and righteous with him. Every one of us is imperfect. He says, from the peoples, not one was with me. So I trod them in my anger, trampled them in my fury. So their lifeblood spurted out on my clothing, and I have stained all my garments. Wow. For the day of vengeance that was in my heart, and my year of redemption. Redemption, that means he's going to redeem some. My year of redemption has come. So some will be saved and some will be destroyed. I looked. This is God speaking again, the Savior, who's coming in crimson in the skies. I looked, but there was no one to help. That means there's no one righteous that he could say his with him. And I was appalled that no one upheld me. Therefore my own arm brought me salvation. Salvation. That's what we find throughout the New Testament. And my own fury upheld. Do you hear someone talking in the background? I hope that's not my son yelling downstairs. And my own fury upheld me. In my anger, I trod down the peoples, made them drunk with my fury, then poured out their lifeblood on the earth. Well, I looked up the word lifeblood, and it really is not lifeblood at all. In the Hebrew, the original Hebrew from when Isaiah was spoken in the Hebrew language and wrote the first manuscripts in Hebrew. It's actually not lifeblood, but it is defined in the concordance. There's a Strong's concordance of every Hebrew language, every Hebrew word in the Bible. And in the Strong's concordance, it says that this word really means a bright red, blood red, glittering object coming from the greatest distance away to its goal. So now I plug that word in to where the word lifeblood is, and it says it poured out or brought this bright red, glittering blood red object from the greatest distance to its goal, earth. So that's what it says. God is actually prophesying that he's going to bring this object toward earth to cause destruction. And the sign of the Son of Man, he says, you're going to look in the heavens and see the sign of the Son of Man coming with great power and glory. Well, scientifically, that's explained by what we know is a phenomenon of electricity and magnetism, whereby this winged globe, which the ancients actually described as a winged globe, it's a glowing, plasma-drenched comet coming in. As it gets close to the sun, the solar winds interact, start blasting out waves of protons from the sun toward this incoming object. It's like a flirtation, electrical flirtation, and an electromagnetic flirtation too, because the sun is swirling out what's called the interplanetary magnetic field, constantly swirling this outward. And the interplanetary magnetic field and this electrical solar winds are interacting with this oncoming comet that's rendezvousing with the sun. And you see, and historians told us they saw flaming, red, glowing streams streaming out laterally, sideways, from this red, glowing globe. And it looked like a glowing red, winged globe. But as that globe gets closer to the Earth, which is what it's prophesied to do very soon, the discharging occurs, and this is perfectly understandable when you realize that this electrical discharge occurs whenever a body, a highly electrified body, gets close to what's called a ground, or a highly receptive, electrically receptive body, such as Earth. If you're walking on a carpet, picking up a lot of static electrons on your body, and you approach a doorknob, you get very close. How many of us have experienced this? Get very close, your hand almost touches the doorknob, and all of a sudden you get this sharp stinging zap. It's a discharge of electricity from your body. You built up an excess of electrical charge, and now it's discharging to this receptive metal object, the doorknob. Every one of us has been stung in that way. Well, that's exactly what will happen on a cosmic scale when this comet comes by with already streaming solar winds blowing out sideways, giving it wings. It's going to discharge down, and what is formed? An electrical glowing sign of the cross. A cross. A discharging vertical column of plasma will discharge to the earth, and that's the sign of the Son of Man that the Lord Jesus prophesies in the Bible, where he says you'll see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with great power and glory.
Hey, John, I have a question for you.
You guys, I gotta go. I got company, but this has been great, and
you're going to leave for company? You're going to go away from us just for some company?
Oh, that's unbelievable.
Well, I've been expecting somebody to come and see me in their here now, but I'll just let John finish with you, Bill.
Okay, that's good. Thanks for coming on, Sheldon.
John, thanks for joining you guys. It was great.
Okay, good being with you. Take care, man.
Talk to you later, guys.
Thanks, Sheldon.
Yeah, bye-bye.
John, I have a question for you about the biblical passage that we're talking about right now, and that is this: didn't the ancient Native Americans, the Indians, and the possibly the Mayans, didn't they also have a I want to say a caricature of this two-winged object? I believe they called it what was it, the blue kachina and the red kachina, and they also had the Thunderbird symbol. Isn't this the same thing?
Right, exactly. That's right. That Thunderbird was what the natives of Central America, Mexico, and South America saw in the sky. Well, it's actually the American Indians of the southwestern U.S., right?
Yes.
They had the Thunderbird symbol. And I'm looking at Zechariah Sitchin, incidentally, the great archaeologist and ancient historian. He wrote the landmark book, The 12th Planet, and he passed away. He died just about a year ago, I think, or during this past year. He wrote the landmark book, The 12th Planet, which most of us have heard of and read at least parts of. And I'm reading from page 240 of Zechariah Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet. And this is what it says here on page 240. Recognized as a great traveler in the heavens, soaring to immense heights at its apogee. That means as its greatest distance away from the earth, and then coming down, bowing unto the heaven at its perigee. That is, as its closest approach to earth. This planet was depicted as a winged globe. So he's saying when it gets close to Earth at perigee, the planet became a winged globe. Well, it certainly would begin to glow more, even at going above there as it got closer to the sun and right above the Earth, moving toward the sun. The solar excitations would make it glow and stream out protons in both laterally from it to both sides, forming what appeared to be wings on this globe. And it says, continues in this Zecharia Sitchin quotation, wherever archaeologists uncovered the remains of Near Eastern peoples, the symbol of the winged globe was conspicuous, dominating temples and palaces, carved on rocks, etched on cylinder seals, painted on walls. It accompanied kings and priests. It stood above their thrones, hovered above them in battle scenes, was etched into their chariots. Clay, metal, stone, and wood objects were adorned with this symbol. And it goes on and on. It says, the rulers of all these nations, Sumer and Akkad, Babylon, and the rulers of Assyria, all revered this symbol. The Hittite kings, the Egyptian pharaohs, the Persian shahs, all proclaimed this symbol and what it stood for, supreme. They proclaimed it supreme. And it remained so for millennia. Central to the religious beliefs and astronomy of the ancient world was the conviction that this 12th planet, the planet of the gods, remained within the solar system, and that its grand orbit returned it periodically to Earth's vicinity. The pictographic sign for this 12th planet, the planet of the crossing, was a cross. Imagine that, a cross. So there you go. That sort of confirms what I was saying that will happen again. As this winged globe, it becomes a winged globe due to the solar flirtation that occurs as it approaches its rendezvous with the sun. And then the wings take on the globe takes on not only the wings, but a vertical discharging column, a vertically discharging column of electrified plasma as it discharges to the Earth, forming the vertical bar of a cross, the sign of the cross. So this is really amazing, really very, very prophetic, and I think it tells people that, turn to God in your hearts, no matter what image we have of God, and we should be actually receptive and respectful of whatever concept a person has of God, because remember, when that person begins to communicate with God in their mind, and just recognize His appearance and take some time away from the loves of this world and the cares of this world to communicate spiritually through meditation. I really do believe that meditation is a way to get closer to God. I think the Hindus and the people who practice meditation have the right idea, clearing your mind of all extraneous thoughts and just imagining the presence of God, and then you can commune with Him. Well, if we were to do that, suppose we have a false image or mistaken image of God, like some people do. It doesn't matter what our notion of His character is. If we simply commune with Him, He will then transfer to our minds His own character and His own being and His ways. So I'm never afraid of anyone who says, yeah, I believe in God, but not the Christian way, because the real God will make Himself known to anyone who opens their minds to Him.
Now, this would be the Spirit of God, right?
Yeah, it's an invisible spirit, and we cannot see God. He's invisible. Well, we certainly can feel His, like Planet X. They could not see Planet X way out there when it was pulling on the outer planets, tugging at the planets in their orbit. But certainly they knew that it existed because of its effects, its gravitational pull. Right. Similarly, we cannot see God, but we can see His effects all around us. We can see Him prophesying in the Bible that, look, I'm bringing the end of this world, and we're seeing the effects of it right now. We're seeing the beginning of the end. It's no time to be cynical. It's no time to be agnostic. Just reach out and say to yourself, look, what do I have to lose? Why am I so resistant to at least meditating and communing with God? And even I've always said to people, look, just say to God, I don't even know if you're there. I don't know if you exist, but I'm willing to give it a little try. Spend a few minutes and just sit here and meditate, clear my mind, close my eyes, or look out at some of the beauty of nature outside my window or in my backyard, and just meditate and feel and expect your presence and your spirit to influence me, my mind. And why not do that? What are we afraid of? Or are we afraid of someone taking control of our minds, taking control of us? Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I don't know
that's
about
what I
that.
advise everyone to do.
I've never experienced that myself. I mean, as we talked a little bit earlier this afternoon, folks, and I mean, I'm a Christian, and I have never had God take me over and, you know, move me around like a puppet. But that also goes into something else, and that is the evil forces, the satanic forces that are acting on the ones that we call the powers that be, and what they're doing right now, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the Lord Jesus, and those who don't believe that he was God, it's okay. You know, I mean, I certainly know that he's God, but I respect other people's opinions to believe he was not God, but he was just a wonderful prophet, a great prophet, and a great man of truth. Okay, let's just assume that's all he was a great prophet and a great man of truth. He had stated in numerous places in the Bible that if you're not with me, you're against me. So he knew he was God. He spoke as God. He was saying, if you don't have my spirit, you've got the devil's spirit. That's what he meant when he said, if you're not with me, you're against me. And then he also said, fortified that interpretation by saying that when the demonic spirit is cast out of a man, that spirit wanders around. Now here we have the Lord Jesus, a man of great truth and honesty who never lied. Mm-hmm. He said that spirit wanders around looking for a new home after he's been cast out of someone's body. And wandering around, finding no place, he decides to go back to where he came, and he finds that past home all prepared for him, garnished, swept clean, because that person no longer keeps the Spirit of God with him. That person has cast out the demon, turned to God, but now he's drifted back to, away from God. And as a result, he's allowed created a vacuum in his soul that allows that demon to come right back in and dwell in him and Jesus says, and he brings 7 more demons with him. And the state of that man, the last state of that man, is worse than it ever was before. So that demon really secures his stronghold inside that person, or that fallen angel really secures his stronghold by bringing other spirits in with him. And we see other passages in the Bible where Jesus, which we acknowledge as a man of great truth who didn't lie, he tells us that he came across a man who lived in a cave, a man of superhuman strength, fierce man, vicious man, wild man. He had to be chained down, and he would actually break the chains. Well, the Lord Jesus says he went to this man and told the demons inside of him to get out of him. He said, "How many are you?" And they replied to him, "Jesus, the Son of God, the Son of the Most High God, why are you bothering us? Why have you come to trouble us before our time?" Now they knew their time was when they were going to be destroyed at some time in history, in future history. And they were deathly afraid of him, and they knew they had to obey him. These are fallen angels who have to obey God. They have to live under his rules. That's why they would love to kill you or me, these demons, but they cannot, because God forbids them to go only a certain distance. They can manipulate us. They're allowed to manipulate us, but they're not allowed to do certain things to us. Well, anyway, they said, why don't you leave us alone? It's not our time. And he cast them out of this man. He said, "How many are you in there, in this man?" And they said, "We are legion." So it's really amazing how spirits can indwell people. So anyone who is afraid of the Spirit of God coming in to bring that person joy and love, this is the Spirit of love. God is perfect love. Anyone who's afraid of being indwelled by perfect love must realize that they're already indwelled by anti-love. And we all have that anti-love spirit in us, that capability. It just doesn't come out all the time. It comes out when we get angry or when I get insulted. My pride is hurt. I'd lash out sometimes in anger. We all do. But if we keep the Spirit of God in us, then we can realize, wow, we can see how vulnerable we are to these demons. So that's why I say we have to invite God into us, because right now we're indwelled by demonic spirits who always don't always make us vicious and villainous and evil. Their purpose is simply to keep us away from God. And if they could do that by making us wonderful humanitarians who feel great pride in their good nature, in their godly nature, well, that's even better, because then they've tricked us into believing that we have attained perfect goodness. And many people are deluded into thinking that they have achieved perfect goodness and that they don't really need God. And that's what the demon's purpose is, to deceive them. Oh, I'm such a wonderful person. I remember thinking that of myself for years, because I was a humanitarian. And then I realized that even our nature is not perfect. I mean, there's the perfection of God that we cannot even comprehend. After all, look at what He's created with His perfection. And look what I can create with my imperfection. Nothing. I can't create anything. So anyway, that's a great impetus for turning to God, especially now when we're at the point of destruction, where we're facing these superhuman forces of nature, earthquakes, etc., that are going to destroy. Most of the people alive today will be dead in a few years.
Yeah, so the Georgia Guidestones aren't exactly incorrect in what they say.
I mean, this is what these demonically possessed leaders of the world who actually worship Satan, that's how they got to such a high level. They worship the demon spirits and have given themselves over to them. And you've heard of the old story about selling your soul to the devil. You've seen movies about it, Devil's Advocate, where someone sold his soul to the devil in order to achieve power and wealth. Well, that's exactly what these men of power do. And the purpose is to kill as many people as possible. Now, in their own human minds, they feel that they're doing it in order to reduce their opposition, their rebellion forces, because they know that they cannot be dictators and totalitarian leaders of the world with 6.5 billion people as opponents, as rebels. So they have to exterminate. What they say in the Georgia Guidestones is 12 out of 13 people alive on planet Earth. They say they have to reduce the population to 500 million. Well, we have 6.5 billion people on the Earth now.
Right.
So they want to reduce it to 500 million. Do the arithmetic. That's killing 12 out of every 13 people.
That's a lot.
I mean, that's worse. That makes Hitler seem like a Boy Scout, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, well, we know that he was evil incarnate.
Right, and yet these people are far more evil than Hitler was.
Yeah, and they make it seem
like these
like
are the guys who put Hitler in power anyway.
And these are the guys that want to make us think that they're looking out for us. They're in charge. Yeah. While they're crashing the economic system and everything else. And
poisoning us in so many different ways. The food is just so it's viciously poisonous. I mean, everything they do, it's just so obvious. With mercury in the high fructose corn syrup, that's mercury is a deadly metal. And I can go on and on. Fluoride in the water for all these years, and so many different toxic chemicals in the food ingredients themselves, and MSG, and it just goes on and on. We could spend hours just describing all the poisons that they've been afflicting us with.
And we definitely don't have hours left.
Yeah, we don't.
No, we've been on 2.5 hours tonight, folks, and this is an excellent show. One of our producers, she is asking a scientific question, and her question is when we start to get more interaction with Planet X and this system that is coming in. Planet X is just it's part of a larger system that's coming in. You have the what's supposed to be the brown dwarf and a bunch of bodies that orbit around it, and Planet X is part of that. When this comes in and this starts interacting with the Earth and we start getting all of these earthquakes, she's wondering what types of tsunamis, wave heights specifically, what historically can we look for on this particular
Well, I believe now the ancient Egyptian priests who were visited by the great philosopher and Greek philosopher and historian Plato, I think it was around, what was it, was it 600 BC or 300
right around
BC?
there.
I'm trying to remember.
650, 600 BC, right around there.
Okay, right. Around 600 BC, Plato visited the ancient Egyptian priests, and the Egyptians prided themselves in being the greatest historians in the world.
Isn't that where we get the Colburn Bible from?
Pardon me?
Isn't that where we get parts of the Colburn Bible from?
Yes, right. The Ipuwer Papyrus, I believe. The Colburn Bible describes catastrophes that occurred with the last passage of Planet X 36 and a half centuries ago. And there was a man named, I have to do more study on, there's another person too, but one of them was Ipuwer, I believe, I-P-U-W-E-R, and he survived it and wrote about the catastrophes that he experienced, and these descriptions run parallel to what the Bible tells us in the book of Exodus regarding the 10 plagues of Egypt. But the tsunamis now you're talking about, back the ancient Egyptian historians, I believe, told, I have to go look at the quotations from the books, written to Critias and to Timaeus, two papers written by historical documents, I think, written by Plato, where he relates what the Egyptian priests told him came from their history of the sinking of Atlantis, which is believed to have occurred around 9000 BC, that these waves that inundated the continent of Atlantis were like hundreds of feet high, many hundreds of feet high. I mean, whole land masses were sunk. And so these tsunamis are going to be, people have to be prepared. Well, right now they haven't gotten real bad, so we can take evasive action. And my plan was this: for everyone living on the East Coast, we have about 40 million, 50 million people living along the East Coast of the United States. But let's not forget the poor people down in Central America and South America too, and also in Canada. Every one of them will be inundated when this, what the geologists tell us is a great threat of a tsunami originating in the Canary Islands. On one particular island in the Canary Islands, the island of La Palma, which contains the volcanic mountain, the Cumbre Vieja volcanic mountain. Now, Dr. Simon Day, who is the leading, and Dr. Bill McGuire, the leading geologists stationed on the island, the Canary Island of La Palma, they tell us in this wonderful documentary that has been presented on many times on the Discovery Channel. It's from the BBC, British Broadcasting Company TV, and it warns people over and over again about this possible tsunami. It doesn't talk about Planet X, but they're so concerned about the tsunami, and I think some of the producers know that there is a threat of Earth changes due to Planet X, and that's why they're airing this program. It's called Mega Tsunami. They tell us, Dr. Simon Day and Dr. Bill McGuire of University College London tell us that this western flank of the Cumbre Vieja volcano has been dislocated, totally disconnected from the mountain proper. It's the western flank and the far eastern end of the Atlantic Ocean, right off the coast of Africa. When that dislocated slab, slides into the ocean, it will create a tsunami. They have scientifically studied, using computer calculations and small-scale modeling, to give us an accurate estimation of the height of the tsunami wave. The scientists at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Switzerland, have done most of the research to estimate the size of this wave, which would be caused by the collapse of this western flank of the mountain into the Atlantic Ocean. The western flank weighing, what Dr. Simon Day tells us, is 500 billion tons of rock. 500 billion tons would slide out and cause a displacement of water. It's like punching, your fist into water, or throwing a heavy, so let's say you took a bowling ball and plunged it into a swimming pool. During the time that bowling ball is penetrating the water, it's displacing far more water than the actual volume of the bowling ball. So likewise, when this mountain plunges in, it's going to displace far more water than its actual volume. When this western flank of the mountain collapses. And they say it will create a tsunami. Well, the first plop, they say, will be higher than 2 Empire State Buildings. It will travel across the Atlantic Ocean toward the Americas at a speed of about 450 miles an hour. It'll take about 8 hours to reach the east coast of the Americas. No one will have adequate time to evacuate. The governments don't care. The governments are not even telling us about this, because, of course, their purpose is to reduce the population anyway. Right. So it's up to the citizenry to get together to organize. And I've been trying to get people, to prompt people to contact emergency medical personnel. The most receptive, motivated people we could find would be emergency medical personnel and firefighters. These people are trained to deal with emergencies, to tackle emergencies, and not to flee in fear from emergencies. So these are the people we have to contact and organize and alert to this growing threat. The scientists on La Palma, Dr. Simon Day and Dr. Bill McGuire, have been warning this year about increases in earthquake activity, as Sheldon had mentioned, all around the island of La Palma. In fact, they had to evacuate people from one of the Canary Islands this summer because of increasing earthquakes. And there is a volcano actually bursting upward from the seafloor, just north of one of the islands, very close, getting close to the island of La Palma. So even the disruption of the Earth's surface around that area could dislodge that half-trillion-ton western flank of the Cumbre Vieja volcanic mountain and trigger this instantaneous tsunami. And we wouldn't have advance warning. But the scientists there have gauges and instrumentation that can monitor this the activity. And whenever these scientists warn us that we're in a high alert mode, that's when we can take evasive action.
Right.
So that's what we need to do. We need to notify the population. Now, where would these EMT people be? They would be in the most vulnerable areas. That's where we want to contact them. Atlantic City, New York, Boston, Norfolk, Virginia, Miami, Daytona Beach. Because they know, these responders know that they would be killed, their wives and children would be killed by the tsunami. They would be most likely to become very active.
Right.
That's who we have to organize, to prompt, to inform, to educate about this incoming planet. And I've already been contacting some scientists who, I shouldn't say that because, take that back, because it's not very good for my safety to be talking about that. But of course, we all know that we're going to try to contact scientists,
right,
and inform them of this danger.
Yeah, and the emergency management people.
Right, well, I wouldn't even, emergency management, yeah, but, they're the government, and I don't know. I'm always afraid of contacting anybody close to the government because that's when they come out and try to...
That's when the long knives come out.
Pardon me?
That's when the long knives come out.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I would never go to try to get an interview with anybody high up in the scientific community.
So we're talking paramedics,
but
nurses.
if you talk to, paramedics are right. Those grassroots people, those are the kind of people you want to reach.
Firemen?
Yeah, and first responders and, people who really care, who are trained to deal with emergencies, even police, although, the police aren't quite as heightened in their training for emergencies as are the emergency medical personnel and the firemen. But, all these people, and again, if you notify these kinds of people where they themselves and their families are vulnerable to this destructive tsunami, if you can really convince them that the tsunami is becoming more likely every day, I think that they would organize.
What kind of an effect would this event have on the West Coast?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. On the West Coast, and there's an oceanographer named at the University of Hawaii named Gary McMurtry. He talks about this in that mega tsunami documentary by the BBC. You should look at it on YouTube. It's called Mega Tsunami.
I've seen that.
And he talks about how there's an erosion. Whenever you have an island, there's always going to be erosion below the water surface of the base of that island. And at the same time, as if it's a volcanic island, you have lava being built up from continual emissions from the volcano until the island becomes very high and top-heavy. And that's when it's vulnerable to... Hold on a second, please.
Yeah. We're talking about the mega tsunami that is expected when the side of the volcano in the Canary Islands collapses. That's okay.
Anyway, it becomes top-heavy and it's prone to collapsing into the ocean.
Right.
And that's how you get these mega landslide-driven mega tsunamis. Incidentally, I was watching the Science Channel, and they're talking about these kinds of events. And they happen to state that 4,000 years ago, the island of Réunion is a French word, but it's actually spelled just like the word reunion. The island of Réunion off the coast of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean collapsed and caused a tremendous tsunami. 4,000 years ago, well, look back, and when was the last passage of Planet X? Nearly 4,000 years ago, 36 and a half centuries. Now, their estimation of that collapse as being 4,000 years ago, that's a very rough estimation.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a more accurate estimation because we know what the orbital period of Planet X is. So we can pretty much assume that that collapse occurred due to the trauma to planet Earth that was caused by Planet X around 1650 BC. In fact, we also have evidence from geologists that the great Santorini volcanic caldera in the Aegean Sea exploded around 1650 BC, 36.5 centuries ago, due to the approach and the devastation, gravitational and magnetic devastation exerted on Earth by this passing brown dwarf star.
So let me get this straight. All of these islands around the world that are prone to this type of activity where part of the landmass may slough off into the ocean, this could all happen in rapid succession around the world?
Probably will, not could, but probably will happen in rapid succession. Suppose you have, okay, let's say, suppose you have a tray of, it's loaded with these ice cream cones or whatever, and they're standing up on ice cream cone holders or whatever, and they're all triple-decker ice cream cones. And someone comes by and starts rattling that tray. All of them are going to start to topple over.
Right.
At the same time.
What about the glaciers and the ice packs in the Arctic and the Antarctic Ocean? Were they
yeah, that
too?
The trauma from this incoming planet, the just the seabed alone. I mean, the lithospheric crust of the Earth that underlies at least the Antarctic, which is, and the Arctic too, because you have a seabed of crust in the Arctic region too.
Mm-hmm.
As it begins to melt, and it becomes more vulnerable to collapse, and as the seabeds begin to buckle due to the magma, the mantle becoming more fluid and heated up and becoming more active, churning more vigorously, then you have the crust beginning to bulge and buckle and move and shift, and that's when you're going to get all these collapses of ice shelves.
Right.
And it's been happening already.
No, I have another question, and this might be a dumb question. How much activity would it take to actually shift the poles, the pole shift that we hear about? Well, would this type of activity be enough to do that, having that much water and weight moving around the world all at the same time?
It definitely would, because we have ancient historical evidence that this has really happened. Like years ago, when I was studying as a for a science degree in education, my geology professor stated, and I'll never forget this, he said, at one time in Earth's ancient history, Earth actually precessed on its axis,
right,
meaning it tilted vertically. And he said, we don't know why. Hold on a second, please.
Yeah.
And that always, it was sort of appalling and curious to me, and I always kept that memory in my mind because of the appalling nature of that statement. And now we know why. You see, what the scientists tell us, to what Dr. Emanuel Velikovsky told us, he was one of the great land-breaking theoreticians who spoke about the catastrophic history of Earth, how Earth underwent its changes, not gradually as mainstream science had been telling us,
right,
but catastrophically in a very short period of time. And Velikovsky had explained how comets would come by, and it's like remember, there's a term in physics called action at a distance.
Right.
For example, if I take a strong magnet, lay it down on your kitchen table, and you put a ball bearing near the magnet, if you put it close enough, if it's within the gravity or the magnetic field of that magnetic influence of that magnet, the magnet will gradually cause the ball bearing to roll closer and closer, and as it rolls closer, the magnetic force between the magnet and the ball bearing will increase exponentially, really, as a function of distance. In other words, if the ball bearing gets one half of its original distance away, it comes halfway toward the magnet, I keep on saying gravity. The magnetic force on that ball bearing does not increase, does not double when the distance becomes half, but the magnetic force actually quadruples, because so we see a force increasing as the inverse square of the distance between the attracting object and the attracted object. And that's what happens to Earth as this planet comes by. It's like a giant hand, that a child's hand spinning with a spinning top. If the child brings the palm of his hand up against the side of a rapidly spinning top, the top slows down in its rotation, and when it does, it loses its force that keeps it straight up, and the top begins to wobble as it slows down. We've all seen that phenomenon.
Right.
And the slower it gets, as it slows down more, it wobbles. The wobble becomes more accentuated, and eventually the top topples vertically, falls over. And that's what God is prophesying in the book of Isaiah chapter 24. In the King James Version, where there's a couple of mistranslations, I corrected it, mistranslations by simply going to the Strong's Concordance of the Hebrew language, and I'll give you the actual words, two words, not removed and cottage, but nod like a hammock. I'll paraphrase Isaiah chapter 24. God says, I will cause the earth to reel to and fro like a drunkard, and to nod like a hammock. Now, if you were to take a model globe of the earth and put it in the bed of your backyard hammock, and pull the hammock back in preparation to let it swing, what would happen to the North Pole of that globe? It would rotate vertically toward the equator.
Right.
And the equator would similarly rotate vertically toward the South Pole. So that's a nod. If you look up the word nod in the dictionary, it's a vertical rotation.
Right.
Like when you would nod to indicate yes. That's what God is saying. He says, I will cause, this was 600 BC when God, the mind of God had spoken to the mind of Isaiah, and compelled Isaiah to write this down. He says, the word of the Lord came to me. That's what Isaiah and Ezekiel and the other prophets always say. The word of the Lord came to me, and they wrote it down. God has that power to influence our minds. And he said, through Isaiah, I will cause the earth to reel to and fro like a drunkard, and to be removed, or to nod like a cottage, to nod like a hammock, and it will fall and not recover.
Okay, so do have prophecy of that actually happening.
Pardon me? The prophecy of, the prophecy has been made around 600 BC.
Right.
And if you go to Isaiah chapter 13, I looked up the word, another word, they use the word, the English translators use the word removed again for planet Earth. God says, I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall be removed out of her place. Well, it's not the word removed. I corrected that translation by simply that mistranslation, by simply going to the Strong's Concordance of the Hebrew language. And God is actually saying, therefore I shall shake the heavens and cause the earth to undulate out of its place. Undulate is, like a waving, bobbing motion, just same as reeling to and fro like a drunkard, or wobbling. So, and the outer planets have actually wobbled. So here's another answer to, I guess I'll be making this long and drawn out, but it's really worth the time and effort. We have seen the actual evidence of planets wobbling. The distant outer planets of Neptune actually wobbled. And that's been scientifically proven. Neptune went through a pole shift where it actually rotated vertically. It tilted vertically. There was what's called a wizard's eye, or a whirlpool on Neptune.
Right.
And that wizard's eye shifted vertically, which proved that Neptune went through a precessing of its axis. So it's already happened. Why? Because Planet X was out there exerting a gravitational influence on Neptune, which we have yet to see.
Right, and it's coming this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We've been on the air for 3 hours now, so we are going to wrap it up for the evening. I'm wondering, are you available to continue this next Saturday night?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I'd be happy to help to bring this information to people who are going to need it.
Because we're really starting to get into the really good stuff now. So if we can take up from the pole shift aspect of it, and get into the really scientific and prophetic sections of this. This would be, I think, really amazing for people.
Yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful for people to learn about this, and my main purpose is to get them to understand that we have our only hope eventually as these disasters build up and intensify. Our only hope is to turn to God in our hearts and our minds. In our comfort, the comfort of our world, we tend to be aloof from God, but now we have to start meditating. You know, getting our minds relaxed into a meditative state, and just make ourselves consciously aware of the presence of God, and that's it, not to think any thought at all, just clear our minds of all thoughts, and just feel the presence of God as we're looking at some beautiful scenery around us, and that's what we have to do to commune with God, and allow God to talk through us, to speak through us, to work His thoughts into us. It's all love. It's something that's going to be greatly beneficial to all of us. And suppose I were to die fat, dumb, and happy, and not experience these catastrophes, then I would die forever. I would never live again.
Right.
But this way, I will have an eternal life with God in a brand new, indestructible body, which He promises to give us in the Scriptures. Not an ethereal plasma, but an indestructible body for eternity in a new world which we cannot conceive of.
Well, I think if everybody practices meditating this week and clearing their heads, I think that that might help us out next week when we talk about this.
Yes, right. That's a good idea, and I'm going to try to continue doing that myself. It's very difficult, but we get distracted. But
yeah,
I'm going to continue to do that, make that a part of my ongoing daytime activities.
Yeah, I try to do that at night before I go to sleep. Just try to clear my mind and make it blank.
Yeah, we've always all heard about the benefits of meditation,
and
I think it's about time we started to experience those benefits.
I think so too. Okay, folks, we are way past out of time. What we're going to do is we're going to transcode this, get this up on YouTube, and then we are going to repeat this show here on the stream so that you can listen to all 3+ hours of it continuously until Monday evening when we do our regular political talk show. And I'd like to thank our guest, John DiNardo, for coming on the show. And we're going to talk to you again next Saturday, and we'll set up a time for the broadcast whenever it's convenient for you. Okay, John?
Sure. Whenever I'm willing to appear at your convenience, Bill.
Okay. Well.
So I know you're producing this, and it's going to be difficult. So I'll leave the timing to you.
Okay. We'll leave it at that then, and this show will repeat. And John and I will speak during the week, and we will set up next week's show, and you can come back to the main show page or check the YouTube channel. That'd be Sun Sky Mysteries channel on YouTube, and we will be talking again next week. John, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your hospitality, Bill.
Yes, yes. And have a good rest of the weekend.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, Bill. Gravitational influence of the sun. This is stated by the scientist, Dr. Harrington. Now, if it was then in 1983 within the gravitational influence of the sun, it would have been sucked in continuously from that time on until now toward the sun. It has to be. It's basic physics. It's like an asteroid. Imagine an asteroid that gets within the gravitational influence of Earth. Even though it's way, way up there, many miles high, it's still barely within the weak gravitational influence of Earth. It's going to be gradually pulled down toward Earth, and as it gets closer, the gravitational force of attraction will increase, and therefore its acceleration will also increase until it comes hurtling toward Earth. And that's exactly what is happening with this brown dwarf star, except that it's not hurtling toward Earth, it's hurtling toward the sun.
John, one of the indicators of this is an email I got from Richard St. Laurent up in Canada. He's another outstanding Planet X researcher. He showed me in this email these graphs of all these near-Earth object asteroids that had just gone up through the roof in the late 90s, so that would just be another indicator.
So you mean there's been a tremendous increase in near-Earth objects that were sighted, huh?
Yeah,
a big increase.
Right.
Ever since from then until now.
I would say like late 90s, maybe 97 or 98. That number just went through the roofs. And you know, Planet X has an entourage of accompanying celestial objects with it as it comes in.
Right. So I mean, as it gets closer, visualize Planet X as a huge beehive traveling through space. You know, with a swarm of bees swarming all around it. Now that would be the gravitationally captured comets and celestial bodies of all sizes, actually. Everything from the size of small planets down to comets, and then smaller objects such as asteroids, and then even smaller objects such as meteors, then boulders, rocks, and even a cloud of iron oxide dust, which it surrounds it. And that's another thing that makes it difficult to see, is that cloud of dust. Besides the fact that it emits only infrared light, which is you know, not only visible with infrared telescopes, but the ancient historians tell us, and even the Bible is a very good ancient historical book. The Bible tells us in the book of Exodus that the waters of Egypt turned red during the time of all these cataclysms. Well, that would be explained by the tail of this comet, or one of its this huge brown dwarf star on a cometary orbit, its tail sweeping the Earth with iron oxide dust that would pollute the water. And indeed, if you go to the book of Exodus, I could read it directly to you, but I could paraphrase it right now. The water was so bitter and foul from this redness that polluted the waters that the people were getting sick from drinking it. And they were digging feverishly, trying to find wells, freshwater wells throughout Egypt during this time. And not only is the book of Exodus describe this event, but also the Colburn Bible, and specifically the Ipuwer Papyrus, I-P-U-W-E-R. This is a historian, Egyptian historian, who lived through these great cataclysms. He describes pretty much the same thing, that the waters were foul and polluted, and people would vomit just from drinking this water. So we see what's going to happen to Earth when this red iron oxide dust its tail sweeps Earth.
Well, that's another subtle way that they're leaking it out through TV shows. They did a remake of that TV series V. Remember that?
What was the name of it?
V. V as in Victor, where these alien humans are living here on Earth with us. Originally, the original one came out in the 80s, but they did a remake of it, and the title of the last episode of the first season was like Red Rain or Red Dust, and then...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, they subtly tell us this stuff all the time, and then Don also came across...
Well, maybe we could find that. Maybe we could find that episode of V. It's titled Red Dust or Red Rain. We could find that on YouTube. Maybe YouTube has practically everything.
One episode was called Red Rain, and the other Red Dust. Yeah, it's interesting. But John also come across this verse in the Bible, Isaiah 63, where it says, "God will send from afar His glittering blood-red object to its distant goal, which is Earth." Can you tell the audience about that, John?
Yeah. You know, I guess maybe as things get more disastrous, people tend to turn closer to God and seek out that invisible being. You know, we wonder why our hearts are beating constantly, who keeps us going, who gives us the magic miracle of life and the wonderful things around us that sustain us and beautify our world. And of course, we all know that there's a God. But we ignore that God when times are easy. Well, now that times have been getting more difficult and more harrowing, I've been getting closer in my thoughts to the existence of God. Again, it sounds sort of hypocritical. You know, we turn to God when we need Him out of fear, but we don't tend to turn to Him when things are going well. Well, I started to read the Bible, and I knew that I had to pray the Bible because there's some symbolism is just so deep that no human mind could fathom some of the symbolism in the Bible. So as I was making myself consciously aware of the invisible presence of God and reading the Bible, I got to this compulsion to go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 63, and start reading. And as I was reading, I was amazed at the symbolic likeness of this Isaiah 63 with the incoming Planet X. And let me see if I could take it out of the King James or the complete Jewish Bible, maybe.
While John's looking that up, I'd also like to tell the audience that it must have been 2 or 3 years ago they had this tremendous red colored iron oxide dust storm over Australia, and as we know, that's in the southern hemisphere, right, John?
That's right. Now, the dust could not have been from the tail of Planet X, because Planet X has not gotten that close to Earth yet. But
right, but Gilbert Erickson, he thinks that was a Planet X related event.
Well, I mean, it could have been a comet. Now, a comet that was saturated with or engulfed in red iron oxide dust. Yeah, if that comet came by Earth, it could have happened. But I don't know. I mean, it's just so hard to say to draw a parallel between that red dust storm, and it certainly is something related to these celestial phenomena that are occurring now. I agree. It's just that it's hard to really say that it's related to being swept by a tail of a comet, because if we were swept by the tail of a comet, do you know what size of land masses that would engulf? That would cover much of the Earth, but this happened in a localized section of Australia, maybe 5 or 10 square miles, something like that. So I don't know what it was. It's some kind of strange phenomenon, but indeed it's related to these crazy celestial events that are occurring. Indeed, all this crazy weather is. But here's Isaiah chapter 63. Quote, who is this coming from Edom? Now, Edom symbolizes red, something red, okay? So there you go. There's a red. We know Planet X is a red body when it lights up. It's been stated that way by the ancient historians. Who is this coming from Edom? From Basra. And Basra is symbolized